I want to start with some ancient classroom history. In 1984, my brother was in high school. Biology teachers in Los Angeles were directed to teach evolution, but not human evolution. So at the end of the evolution unit, his bio teacher told the class that he couldn't talk about evolution anymore. Then the teacher put on a record and pinned a poster of a gorilla on the wall. My brother was just kind of noticing that the teacher had brought a record player into class and trying to figure out why, and then the singing started. The teacher had put on that old disco song, "We Are Family" by Sister Sledge. You get it? We are family, apes, humans. It's not very subtle, but you have to admire the teaching style. Anyway, the teacher let it play, and the students got the point that the teacher wasn't allowed to make out loud. Then he faded it out and went on to the next unit. So here's the issue. We science teachers know a lot of facts, and some of them, like anthropogenic climate change or the dangers of pollution, or of course evolution, some of these facts contradict religious, economic, and social beliefs. So the question is, how do we teach science when its conclusions are not welcome to our audience? How do we teach controversial science issues? Before we get to some history, I just want to talk a little about the popularity of classroom controversy. Teachers often hate it, but educational researchers seem to love it. A lot of people have written books and articles about having contentious classroom conversations, and they mostly all conclude that it's a pretty good idea. Here's one of the books by Visano and Jakubowski. This was their take from Teaching Controversy. Controversy means getting students to look at what assumptions they are bringing to a discussion, leading them to recognize their own biases. Ideally, it means encouraging them to get out of the frames they have been using and perhaps thinking more unconventional thoughts. Thinking unconventional thoughts. That's pretty much exactly what we want our students to do. But we spend our time teaching a lot of facts, because without the facts, even the controversial ones, our students won't master the tools of science, the scientific method, and how to bundle evidence into a theory. Unfortunately, the powers that be, the states, the school boards, the parents, they pick our facts for us. They pick our curriculum, they pick our textbooks, and often they don't want us to discuss anything that contradicts the prevailing view. Unconventional thoughts are often no longer welcome. So I want to dig back a little into history to try to find the time when a teacher teaching facts started to become a social hot potato. I was tempted to go all the way back to Galileo, but I'll keep it a little more modern and start at Horace Mann. More or less, as soon as he set the model for the modern public school, this is in the 1840s, schools began to be seen as a way to convey public morals. Mann's approach was that schools should be sectarian, but definitely Christian. Here's what he wrote. Our system earnestly inculcates all Christian morals. It founds its morals based on religion. It welcomes the religion of the Bible. And that approach stuck over the next few decades. By the 1900s, teachers were expected to teach what the principal told them to and nothing disagreeable. Here's what one high school teacher said in 1926. I was asked to refrain from discussing the coal strike, the Negro problem, the controversy between chiropractors and allopaths, the government control of the railroads, the Ku Klux Klan, evolution, dating, dancing, and card playing. In brief, everything that goes to make up the conversation of an educated man was classified as controversial and hence taboo. This was around the same time that the famous Scopes trial took place in Tennessee. A teacher was put on trial for violating the state law that made it illegal to teach evolution. It's sort of amazing to me that this trial was nearly 100 years ago, and it still looms large in teachers' minds. Now, no one is being put on trial anymore for teaching evolution, but teachers still feel the same community pressure not to teach this subject, and many of them act on it. A study of high school biology teachers was done in 2019, and it found that only 2/3 of them expressed to their students that evolution through natural selection is settled science. So if they weren't teaching evolution as science, what were they doing? When it comes to teaching controversy, there are probably as many sides to this issue as there are teachers, but one thing that they were doing was simply avoiding the controversy. The same 2019 study found that about 15% of high school biology teachers just avoid evolution. About 6% say that creationism or intelligent design are valid scientific theories, and another 12% said some kind of mixed messages. I should point out, by the way, that I'm just using evolution as a handy proxy for all controversy in science, but there are plenty of others. One teacher I spoke to from a suburb in Utah told me she wanted to do a lesson on the environmental impact of Canadian tar sand oil, but decided against it because the local population overwhelmingly supports the Keystone Pipeline. So she just stayed silent. So let's start to keep track of how many sides we've got on this issue. For some people, the best strategy with controversial issues is avoidance. If it's going to raise eyebrows in your community, just don't teach it. Another approach is to simply stick with facts. I spoke to one 40-year STEM education veteran teacher. He starts his classes by explicitly saying that science and religion are entirely different things. There are many religious scientists who don't have any trouble separating faith and science. The Big Bang Theory itself was proposed by a priest, after all. Another teacher told me she starts every year by saying that science, pseudoscience, and faith are just three different things, and she's only going to teach science. These teachers short-circuit the controversy by sticking to the facts. So strategy number 2, just the facts, which researchers call directive teaching. And we're not done with our strategies. There's yet another way to teach controversial science. You can stay neutral. Some teachers don't take a position. They let their students sort out the controversy. A teacher I spoke to described how her in-person students don't want to wear masks. Even Anthony Fauci said masks weren't important, they said, and that was right. On March 8th, 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, Fauci said that. But it's not true anymore. Still, she didn't tell her students the new information. She stayed neutral and let them do a claim evidence reasoning task on mask wearing. Through their research, they determined that Dr. Fauci had gotten new evidence and changed his mind. And that's how science works. So strategy number 3 is to teach the controversy. Researchers call this strategy non-directive teaching, where teachers stay neutral in the face of controversy. So I thought I had the approaches covered. Researchers suggest directive teaching for non-controversial topics like the organelles of a cell, and non-directive teaching for controversies like mask wearing. You may have noticed I removed avoidance from the list because no researchers seem to really recommend avoidance. But what about evolution again? To scientists, it's non-controversial, but to some non-scientists, evolution tramples over very personal and deep-held feelings. If we use only directive teaching, we risk alienating our audience, and they won't learn any science skills if they hate their teacher. But non-directive teaching doesn't feel right either. A teacher staying neutral about settled science, won't that send the message that scientists have doubts about something that they don't actually doubt? Enter 2 more researchers, Brian Warnick and Spencer Smith. They want to synthesize the directive-non-directive dialectic into a more flexible middle ground. They wrote that categories of directive and non-directive teaching need to become more refined and nuanced because of the multidimensional nature of what it means to learn to be rational. Multidimensional nature. What does that mean? Well, rationality has a lot of components according to Warnick and Smith. It has reasonableness and self-reflection, self-confidence, but at the same time, a sense of fallibility. And you don't get any of those things by just believing what the teacher says. Very specifically, here's how they put it. If the student is influenced because the teacher is exercising social authority, then the student seems to have been led away from a life of reason. But there's another way. Rationality. We can share with students the path of evidence and reasoning that leads to the correct scientific conclusion. They call this approach soft directive teaching, and it's appropriate for topics where the science is clear, but science's impact on humans causes social controversy. I can't emphasize enough, we as teachers are not capitulating to popular opinion. We don't pass judgment on our students, because rationality is not easy. Science is not easy. Soft directive teaching centers empathy over authority. In the soft directive teaching model, we think through scientific social controversies by showing respect for the virtues of rationality. We even show that fallibility is part of the scientific process. There's nothing more science-y than changing your mind in the face of new evidence. So what about my personal learning? This is a big question for me because I'm a science teacher. Isn't it a little weird to not just teach facts? Well, at our current stage of human knowledge, for example, anthropogenic climate change is a scientific certainty. Why don't I just say that? I've given several reasons already, but here's one last very personal reason for soft directive teaching. Do you remember Jacobowski and Visano from before? Here's another one of their observations. Teaching controversy is also about expressions of power and cultural control. Of course I teach facts, but I must remain aware that my students are on their own intellectual journey, and my job is to guide, not to cajole them. Directive teaching can easily turn into colonial, culturally insensitive teaching. So, how is my practice going to change from all this research? Well, as a teacher, I now realize that I have a choice. I can present myself as the final authority and deliver my received wisdom, like a sage on a stage, like we used to say in my day. Or I can use this new soft directive mode and act as a guide. I deliver the tools. I define fact and theory and the scientific method. I teach the features of rationality. But then it's my job to get out of the way and let students discover their own truth. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in a world where rationality itself is under attack. Political voices shout at my students in a very directive way. Still, I feel confident that teaching reason rather than just teaching facts is the way to go. That biology teacher in 1984 didn't just tell his students to make a connection when he showed them a gorilla picture. He just gave them a little push in that direction and let them make up their own minds. And some, it's true, might still believe that human evolution is a blasphemous fiction. But either way, they will have exercised the habit of reason, not the teacher. And I think that is our real objective. Thank you.